மூ This is a poem in Tamil by Subramanya Bharati. Malai Poludil, the time is dusk. Oru medai mishaye, a stage is set. Vanayum, sky, and Kadalayum, sea, nokki irundhen. I see the sky and the sea. Moolai Kadalinai, at the sea's end, Avvana Valayum. The sky sort of bends. Muttamitte, to kiss. Taruvi, and to hug. Mugirdal Kandeen. I see them, I see the sky and the sea kissing and hugging. And then he goes on to more sort of sensuous and erotic imagery. But let's stop the poet here and see how much we want to entertain this image. Not so much the erotic image, but the romantic one. the romantic image of the sky and the sea actually physically meeting. Because we know, knowledge from the astronomical sciences has allowed us to know that those layers of the atmosphere, which we call the sky and the sea, do not physically meet at all. Yet this meeting of sky and sea is not entirely in the poet's imagination alone, because we can all see it. When we're at the beach, at the horizon, it seems that the sky and sea are indeed meeting. Of course, beyond that initial impression, the poet projects an eroticism into the sunset, because what they do in the dark is anyone's guess, really. Yet what is important here is that our perception of the horizon allows for a possibility of the sky and the sea meeting, while all the body of knowledge that we have today points conclusively to the impossibility of such a meeting. So as we stand here at the beach, there is the sky and the sea, and the sun sort of sets on their meeting that never was. Albert Einstein, the by now household physicist, and Rabindranath Tagore, the household poet, well, at least in India, the two met a few times in their lifetime. Both had won Nobel Prizes by the time of their meeting, Tagore in 1913 for his collection of poems Gitanjali, and Einstein in 1921 for his paper on the photoelectric effect. In 1930, Einstein invited Tagore to his summer house in Kaputh, near the south of Berlin. And as you can imagine, the meeting went quite viral by the 1930s standards. And the conversation was recorded and later published. As Tagore entered the room, Einstein leaned over and whispered to him. "I memorized a line of yours," he said. "We come closest to greatness when we are great in humility." I like that line of yours. I believe it. Tagore smiled and whispered back. "I would memorize your lines," he said. "I would memorize your lines, but unfortunately, they are all numbers." And that begins their conversation.
It's not really a conversation. They're just talking past each other. They're really not talking to each other. They're not really expanding on the points each of them are making. Einstein says something, it begins with a question addressed, and there is seemingly a kind of a dialogue, but what very quickly happens is a kind of a assertion of two different viewpoints. In fact, Einstein, later writing, when he wrote this Festschrift, when he writes a letter to Romain Rolland, he writes, quote, "My conversation with Tagore was rather unsuccessful because of difficulties of communication and should, of course, never have been published." And for a very long time, many would have thought that it didn't matter whether it was published or not, because it really did not make any contribution to any of the debates, either in physics or in philosophy of physics or whatever. It just was symbolic of two so-called great minds meeting. And a very famous photograph, which is there in the announcement of this, was taken when they were both in New York, and New York Times published. I think it called it as a caption like "A mathematician meets a mystic in Manhattan" or something like that. And apparently that photo was kept in this Compton, a very famous physicist, Nobel Prize winner, who used to keep it in his office. And I learned it all later on, because I have that photo in my office too, mainly because I like their hair so much.
Their hair possibly, but a definitive punctum in the image is their misaligned gaze, their views that do not quite see eye to eye. And in fact, it is significant that their conversation was published, because it now presents a very important failure of our modern times, an important failed meeting of science and art, of tradition and modernity, and of course, of West and East. But perhaps the failure is not with each of their individual views. Perhaps the failure lies in our collective binary gaze that imposes discreteness upon that which may be entangled.
rimamma samamma sarere darire mamamma rimamma risasa sasasa sasasa